Hi, and welcome to Writer's Ramble. I'm Michael.
And I'm Deanna.
We went to a NaNoWriMo event. I don't know what else to call it. It was just a thing where we sat there and we wrote, and they had events related to it. I think it was actually kind of smart. They had what they called word sprints, where it was literally just a competition where you try to, in your own story, not even like with a writing prompt, just write as much as possible, and then whoever had the most words at the end wins. And Deanna actually won one of them. There was 2 rounds, and the second round you actually managed to get some prizes.
Yeah, so I got this nice novel from nothing. It's a helpful little guide for, plotting out your story, writing about your characters, and it's just really helpful. And I was actually filling in some just before we started this, and I also got this cool shirt, which I've always wanted to get one of these, and I just never did, but now I have one, so yay.
So, yeah, it was a really cool event. There was a lot of, obviously, writing going on, and the atmosphere in general, I feel like, helped to feel inspired. Speaking of which, inspiration is hard to come by, especially for me. I feel like you're better about it. But in case you are feeling uninspired right now, which is no good in November, and you're doing this challenge, then here are some tips for how to get past some writer's block.
And brief disclaimer, this is different for everyone, so what might work well for you might not for others, and vice versa. Something that's helped me greatly throughout the years is having a writing playlist, so I have a selection of songs that I've compiled over time that helps me write personally, but this doesn't work for everyone. It sounds like for you, this isn't really a method that works for you.
When I write, I feel like silence is best. Some people like the sort of inspirational feelings that different kinds of music can give them. For me, I can't help but be distracted, but to each their own.
Yeah, I'm sorry that doesn't work for you. That sucks.
Oh, well.
Another helpful one is looking at different inspirational quotes, different writing quotes. Something that I've always kind of latched on throughout the years is, and I don't remember who said this, so I'm sorry, but, write the story that you want to read. That's always been most helpful for me personally. It's also helpful to remember that, you can't be a perfectionist when you are writing. I know that's something that stops a lot of people from writing, and then they have the worst case of writer's block that never goes away, because they can't even begin to write. And so I know I've seen quotes before that encourage you to just write, because ultimately it's impossible to write a perfect story. If you were to try to attempt that, you wouldn't be able to get a single word down, so just don't even do that. So.
And if we're talking about getting words on the page, I mean, this is advice that I think is common, but, it makes sense. You can edit later. Always remember that. I am a little bit more of a perfectionist, and I don't want to just start writing down random nonsense. But if I feel like I can't help but put down nonsense, at the very least I'm still putting something down. Mm-hmm. And you know what? You may end up throwing it out later. That doesn't really matter, because you never know what you are going to keep and throw away, and if that helped you get back into the spirit of writing, you still essentially made progress.
Yeah, there's a reason why we edit, because it would be terrifying if we had to publish the first draft.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
One that I've relied on throughout the years is actually watching writing-related videos. There are a lot of author-tubers, I guess you would say, out there that exist. My personal favorite is Jenna Morossi. I probably said that incorrectly, so I do apologize, but I love Jenna's videos. They've been very helpful for me. As long as you don't fall into a rabbit hole of watching YouTube videos and just making a day of that, don't do that.
No, you should do that. Keep watching our videos.
Oh, that's okay if it's our videos.
Increase our runtime and engagement, but that's just us, no one else. We're the exception.
If you're able to have a writing buddy, that's awesome, because they can really help you brainstorm or inspire you to just write in general if they notice that you're slacking, maybe. I know that you're a helpful writing buddy for me, but I've also reached out to other people in my life if I've been really stuck on something, because sometimes it's helpful to have an outside perspective. I know I've gone to my mom a lot because she's been an avid reader all of her life, and so, I like to see things from more of a reader perspective. I've also reached out to different friends that have helped me a lot with brainstorming.
I'm actually not sure what to say in terms of this because I only have her really, and I don't know what I'd do without her. I got lucky that I married a writer. That's my advice. Marry a writer.
Yeah, simple.
Easy, yeah. I can't think of a better way to do it.
Yeah. This next one's kind of situational, but have you noticed that you have the most inspiration to write when you are stuck having to do something else? Whether that's, writing an essay, going to work, or running errands, or whatever it is you have to do. Like, that's when I'm, like, peak inspiration. And I'm like, oh man, like, if I had my laptop in front of me, I would be, like, just shredding the keyboard right now. So here's, like, a possible idea, like, if you have other things, like, you have to get done that you've been putting off, like, maybe do that and see if, like, while you're doing those things, you're like, yeah, I'm getting all sorts of inspiration of things I want to write in my story.
I feel the need to add a caveat here that be careful not to do that too much, or else you will forget to go back to writing.
You might just end up just, like, deep cleaning your house instead.
You're like, what was I doing?
There are some people that do just put off their writing by spring cleaning and running errands and, I don't know, quilting or something. So,
Underwater basket weaving.
Yeah. Another helpful one is sometimes just editing. If you're not quite ready to actually start adding new words to your document, sometimes just looking over what you've previously written is very helpful because there's bound to be edits that have to be made, and that kind of helps, like, ease you into being in that mindset to start writing as well.
I feel like if you're more like me as a writer, I feel the need to mention this doesn't work for everybody. This one in particular doesn't work for me. I'm just not someone who enjoys editing a whole lot, and it makes me want to write less.
You poor soul.
So take this one with a grain of salt, but if you're more like her, it might work better for you.
Some people have a writing ritual, like some people really need a cup of coffee or tea, or I'm trying to think of
the blood of a virgin on the spring equinox.
Yeah, normal things.
Yeah. That one's a little harder to do. I find myself lacking in inspiration a lot because I just can't find any good virgins the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's tough. I found a kind of interesting little ritual that worked for me before in the past. I don't, like, commonly practice this, but it has worked for me. I noticed that whenever the power went out during a storm, I'd have to light candles, and I would be forced to not look, at social media, and so in that case, I was like, this is the perfect time to actually work on my story, and so I realized one day, I was like, I don't fucking need the power to go out in order to just shut off the lights and light a candle and just write that way. I can just pretend that the power is out. And so I have done that before, and I got pretty good success that way. It's kind of a weird ritual, I feel like, but it worked. So if it works for you, awesome. If you find yourself particularly stuck with where you are currently in your story, something that I would recommend is try writing a scene that you are excited to write about, because sometimes we are just stuck at kind of a boring part of the story. Maybe it's something that's necessary to write, but we're just really not in the mood to write that right now. Like, you're allowed to write something that you are excited about, and sometimes that's what you need in order to get out of that rut, and then you can go back and tackle the rest of the scene that you didn't really want to write. You can just kind of connect the dots that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stories naturally need to have flow and sort of connective tissue between them, and those parts can sometimes be a little more difficult to feel are important, but they are important if only for pacing reasons. So yeah, the nice part about writing is it doesn't have to be done chronologically, and I've only ever written one full-length novel, but I did find doing it chronologically at a certain point I just lost all momentum, and it took coming up with new ideas that really wouldn't fit in the next chronological part of the story to find the drive to move forward. And yeah, it's not as hard as you might think to just kind of go back and be like, okay, well, I can fit this here and this seems to fit better here, and yeah, there we go.
Mm-hmm. I will say, I'm sure this can't work for everyone, because I know some people just really need to go in chronological order, but if that's something that you feel that you don't have to do necessarily, I definitely recommend that when you do feel particularly stuck and you find you just haven't moved forward in a while, just jump ahead a little bit and then go back later.
Yeah.
A very common, tried and true tip here is to just read, because oftentimes we might find that we just kind of get stuck in our own head. We forget about helpful words that might be great for our document, and so getting out of your own head and getting into someone else's head for a little bit, seeing their different writing styles is just really helpful. I know whenever I'm reading a book, I find words that either might be new to me, or I'm just like, oh yeah, that is a word that exists, why don't I ever use that?
If you're like me and you have, not trying to brag, a decent vocabulary, you might know a word, but it's just not accessible right now, and it's just sitting there in the back of your mind. And I found that sometimes if I just take a day or two in the middle of the night, it's like, oh, parallax. Wow, I couldn't think of that at the time. And it really does end up being like that more often than you'd think. Just not a moment you'd think that it would come to you. You're not even thinking about it actively, and it just pops in your head. And I know that's more situational, but...
And the one that we found to be most helpful, hands down, is to just write. It might seem kind of counterintuitive to write when you are feeling, or when you're experiencing writer's block, rather, but there's something about just forcing yourself to write when you actually sit down. I feel like that's the hardest part, is just getting to that point of actually sitting down and opening up your documents. But once you're at that point and then you start putting words to screen, you're already past the hardest point, and then it's things in motion stay in motion. You just gotta get things into motion.
Yeah.
And I know when I was younger, I was really against this tip, because I had the mindset oh, you can't rush or force inspiration. Yes, you can. You just do it.
I feel like I want to say, though, you can't force that natural inspiration.
Yeah.
You can force yourself to write, and then later when you are feeling a little bit better, you might be able to edit it to be better than it was. I know this is the most cliche and overused tip you probably have ever heard, and you might be sick of hearing it by now, and you might even know that it's still a good tip even though you've heard it 1,000 times, but you just don't want to hear it anymore. Sorry, we're saying it again. Just write really is what you have to do sometimes. There's no way around it, unfortunately.
And obviously you might not have that inspiration right away, but I found that even when I was really uninspired, once I did actually start writing, then I was super in the zone. It just took forcing myself to get to that point, to get in the mood, and then it worked.
And I will say there are occasions where it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, force yourself to write. And if it doesn't click after maybe an hour or so, maybe then give up for the day and just try to force yourself to write again tomorrow. But like I said, sometimes there's just no way around it.
Yes, which leads us into our final point. Sometimes you do just need to take a break. Mm-hmm. Because, like you said, sometimes forcing yourself to write doesn't always work. While it does usually work for me, there have been a few instances where nothing was working, including everything else I mentioned in this list here. And in those cases where I felt just very brain dead, and I would especially feel this way maybe after work, where you don't need to think about more things for the day. Sometimes you just need to pay attention to your own mental health and just take a break. Go on a walk, maybe watch a movie, or do anything else, and you can try again tomorrow.
Yeah. These tips might sound contradictory, but it really just kind of depends on how you're stuck. Feel free to rewatch this video as many times as it takes to try each different one if none of them are working for you. Or watch a better YouTuber. I'm not your mom.
But I've been Deanna.
And I've been Michael.
And thank you for listening to Writer's Ramble. Bye.
And make sure to check under your bed for plot buddies. Bye.